IBA, so he'll be joining us. And it's an honor for us that we've got people from industry, from software houses, from tech companies. So, and I'll just do a small 1-minute introduction of Paolo, and then I'll ask him to start. The session will be very interactive, so you can, if you have any questions, just start the discussions and do the things like that. So Professor Paolo is a full professor at the University of Rome at SMCS. He has over 70 publications in well-reputed journals. He has produced more than 50 theses. So he has got a wonderful academic track record, and he has been involved in various research projects, the European Union projects, the Erasmus projects. So, his expertise are in theoretical computer science, and just yesterday he gave us a wonderful talk on blockchain and contracts, and he was discussing the formal aspects of it. So today we just thought that it's a good idea to talk to industry and see what are the things that we can do. Right? Over to you, Paolo. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction, and I will certainly not leave to expectations, but I will try to engage you in some reasoning about this bit, because actually, can you hear me? It's better? Because the title of the seminar challenged me to think of the role of IT, but especially to what we mean by growth, because it can be different things to different people. And of course, I'm also interested in your perspective as people from the industry. So I will try to offer some hint of discussion, and as Professor Shakil said, the session has to be interactive. So anytime, please raise your hand or just jump in. And if you have a very strong disagreement with me, then you keep it to the end. But if you want to raise some point, then it's a good time you do it anytime. No, I'm joking, even if you disagree. Okay, so a view on IT, a view on growth, what role for IT? Actually, what role for IT? I will present some case studies of what could be interesting for as a way of applying IT, and some problematic issues that are there as well. The case studies are studies in which I am directly involved, or in which colleagues who work next to mine are next to me are involved. So, information technology. The first thing is IT just a technology? And probably we must respond, no, it isn't. Because it has some characteristics that, of course, technology has shaped the world as we know it, and has shaped it for all the span of human life on Earth, from the first rock tools to the biggest supercomputers. But with IT, there is something which is peculiar, pervasiveness, first of all. We have it in the production cycle, in everyday life, constraining regulatory bodies, because on both ways, because regulatory bodies are challenged to bring in regulations, but the way in which they work are continuously disrupted by the presence of technology. And of course, every great innovation changed the shape of a production cycle, or the shape of everyday life, or constrained regulatory bodies, but not altogether the way IT does. Cross-dimensionality. So we have IT at the in the virtual world. It creates a brand new world, the Metaverse. Whatever we can think of it, is a proposal to go beyond the normal social life. Of course, the physical aspect, we can interact remotely, we can control things remotely, which is possibly the first time in our history. And of course, its impact cognitive abilities. So new abilities have to be developed. Old abilities become obsolete, and one problem is how can we make them work in the new situation, not to lose them. And another thing which is unique to information technology is that it's rooted in abstract thinking. So even if we see the object, even if we see the chip, even if we see the robot, the way it is being developed derives from some abstract manipulation of symbols. In the end, we have logics, we have computational structures. There is no way of going out of it when we talk of information technology, which has also raised the question: how do we pass from abstract thinking to the concrete consequences of this abstract thinking? And of course, from the perspective of the theoretical computer science, so to speak, it's like we unleash something wild and see what happens. But shouldn't we think of what can actually be done, and how can we actually direct those things that were just computational structures and then become embodied in something which has that kind of consequence? So now, of course, innovation. And speaking of innovation is somehow a pointless exercise, but as we speak, new innovation arrive. But we all know that the most recent ones are related to blockchains, so smart contracts. I discussed them yesterday. Non-fungible tokens. It's more of a gadget, it's more of a gimmick now, but it might become significant. DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations, they might change the shape of collaboration, cooperation, for example. And cryptocurrencies, of course, cryptocurrencies have been the vehicle for the diffusion of blockchain. But now blockchain goes much beyond the fact of just supporting cryptocurrencies, and the DAOs, smart contracts, NFTs are more interesting things, I think, now, because everybody has observed the volatility of cryptocurrencies. So there's a long story there, but I don't think it's the most interesting application of blockchain anyway. AI related, and ChatGPT is all the rage these days, and there might be some discussion on how is it intelligent. Games contain a lot of AI. It's an ever-growing industry, and it has both the software and hardware aspect, which are innovative. And it's, again, it's a new thing that the industry of games becomes such a big thing, because people have always played, but they've never needed an industry that developed to play. The most industrial things that there were board table games, Monopoly. Face recognition has become important, especially in the field of security. And we know that it can be used for social control, and we have many examples of this. And autonomous systems can be embodied in physical robots, for example, but they can be software agents acting, for example, on the stock exchange, making decisions which might have tremendous impacts. Sorry, I always mistake. The Internet of Things, smart devices, remote sensing, and of course the possibility of having machines to communicate. There is, of course, a big application in smart houses, but smart cities could also benefit of some smart devices and remote sensing. And massive calculations. The cloud offers in principle anybody the possibility of running these massive calculations. So apart from the commercial aspect of it, we can have precision medicine. So accurate results from analysis, accurate models of medicines, and accurate predictions of what would be the way in which a certain medicine would act on a certain patient. So a recent paper I just published, actually I just collaborated in publishing with people from genetics, from computational genetics, was a completely virtual experiment where they modeled the impact of a certain active principle on some molecules on some biological mechanisms in our body. And they discovered that there were two new things that were not considered before. So we can do that kinds of thing. Data mining, of course, we can feed intelligence systems in the government, in the industry, in the commerce, whatever, with data. So one thing that person from Google said is it's not that Google has better algorithms for making prediction. It has more data than anybody else, basically. So the importance of data, and then it means also the importance of the quality of this data and of the provenance of this data and the security of this data become important. And what we can deem as precision agriculture, I don't know if this word has ever been used, but in analogy with precision medicine, weather forecast, identification of crops which are more resistant to diseases or which are more productive, and I will have a case study on this. So all of this can be allowed by having this kind of capability for massive calculation. There is a downside. Cyber attacks, cyber threats, cyber warfare. When we know what's going on. Behavioral control, and especially we saw what happened in China with COVID and face recognition and tracking of individual violations of privacy, of course, whether by recognized institution or by attacker. Creation of redundancies in the labor force, typically. So, as I said, there are capabilities which are made obsolete. Can we preserve them? Can we give them a new role? Can we develop new capabilities on top of existing ones without disrupting completely the self-definition of a person? And the whole world of the dark web, where cryptocurrencies, for example, are the currency. So it's a downside, it's a dark side. One might question, are these direct consequences of technological developments? Or is it not the case that technological developments have entered this world like they entered the normal world, let's say, but just by accelerating processes that were already there. So is any of this new? The downside and the plus side. Is any of this new, doesn't it build on processes and on things that have more or less already been there? So on the minus side, imbalance of power, so by behavioral control, for example. Orientation to profit, so problems with climate change, for example. Illegal activities. But on the plus side, it widens the possibilities of searching for knowledge. It widens the border of where we can go and look for knowledge. We can look in the metaverse if we want. Sparing of time, sparing of physical effort, and then the problem becomes, what do we do with this free time? What do we do with the less physical effort that is demanded? We just leave people out, or we can imagine new ways and new intelligent ways of recovering the things that we have left free. And condensation of knowledge in reusable form. So knowledge, we have access to knowledge in unprecedented ways. But the point is we need to be able to reuse it. We need to be able to develop new knowledge based on this, not just to accumulate as might often be the case. So dually, a view on growth. Increase of population. So this is normally taken as an indication that mortality has decreased, there is better access to healthcare, so population increases. But we know that population increases up to a point where it starts decreasing because better level of education, especially for women, make families bring to the world fewer children. But the problem is one of velocity here. And once again, acceleration is probably the key word. So we are increasing because of the benefits of what I was mentioning at a faster rate than the counter mechanisms take to set in. So reduce mortality, new sources of food, and increase in production of food. Increase of global wealth, that's also an argument which is taken, for example, in favor of globalization in terms of, sorry, I put the Italian acronym for gross national product. In Italian is prodotto interno lordo. But it's GNP. Of average income. But again, one say as well, the average income has come from $1 per day to $3 per day. Because of the urbanization, because people have found work in the industry. But this comes at the expense, for example, of cutting the connections, cutting the ties with a local, with a rural village, where you had a network which would support it. So $1 in a village is, in a sense, more than $3 in the town. So once again, there is always this duality to be looked at. Increase of global production in terms of physical products, and we see these enormous ships sailing the oceans with this incredible amount of products on it. So all the rhetorics of dematerialization then actually brings to the fact that the material which is produced is much more than before. And but more interesting possibly, new types of products, new types of services arise. So there is a downside. I already mentioned some aspect. Climate change, appropriation of knowledge, which is somehow sequestered by the big players, and the point of availability and the quantity of data is part of this. Conflicts over resources, because whatever anybody can think, resources are limited, and especially if you want to produce mobile phones, you need some rare earth material. So there are conflicts, and we know that. Uncontrolled urbanization, as I was mentioned. So we are in Karachi. It's quite impressive, and loss of soil. So in the long term, we are losing soil. We're losing cultivable soil. Once again, is any of this new? Why are those downsides? Because as the man, or the humanity, has gone through a long process of separating itself from nature, which is somehow impossible because we are natural people, and even if we spend more time in the virtual world than in the physical world at times, we are nature people. We are made of organic matter. Colonialism, and so appropriation and profiteering. Authoritarian systems which can benefit and which can strengthen themselves with a new technology. On the plus side, this kind of knowledge allows us to rethink the metabolic exchange with nature. Makes us be more efficient in recycling, in reuse, and so it can restore some situation locally. Organizational resistance, preservation of data, movements which demand for control over resources, and we know the role of Twitter, for example, in recent happenings. But beware of the medium is the message effect. Beware of the fact that by just sending out messages, we think that we are changing things. In the end, you need to take some action directly. And the possibility of cooperation, the kind of interconnection that we have, makes it possible to have cooperation at a much wider level than expected. And I mentioned digital autonomous organizations, and those can be used. So basically, what they are is, you can think them in terms of crowdfunding. Is not exactly the same, but you bring together competencies, resources, in order to achieve some project, and then you redistribute in some way the outcomes of these processes. Okay? They can be in terms of money, but they can be in terms of access to the product of the corporation. So this is also made possible by technology. Yes, please.
Well known that population is governed by Lotka-Volterra model, so predator-prey. Is that the same case? Would that sort of go up to the downside of growth as well? Would that also be governed by some sort of balancing model?
Sorry, which model you mentioned?
Lotka-Volterra model, which is predator-prey model. Population is governed by Lotka-Volterra. Lotka-Volterra essentially is that as food grows, then you have an increase in prey, and then eventually, because of an increase in prey, predators will increase. So the system goes through a sine or cosine function, basically. It eventually starts settling to a particular band.
Yeah. This is derived from the predator-prey model, for example. This is one aspect. Another aspect is that as I mentioned, new forms of food come in. And there is a big discussion on insects in these days in Europe, at least. So yes, the point is that, as I mentioned here, loss of soil. So we have more food, but we consume more soil. And on the other hand, you have new forms of food, can be insects, but there is all this industry of manufactured meat, for example, where you have two models. One is you grow cells, or another one you process some vegetable material so that it undergoes some process which makes it more similar to meat. So all of this, you can see this, yeah, it's a new source of food, but on the other hand, it's also, how can I say, a commercial solution to the problem of loss of soil. So since we cannot grow things because we do not have the space to grow or grow in them, let's grow them in factories. So the fact is that we might have more food, but we have a different kind of food. And in general, we have a lower quality of food. If you want to have a quality of food in terms of, for example, of this manufactured meat, that's extremely expensive as of now. Well, not extremely, but it's more expensive than a good piece of meat, real meat.
Would you say the downside is also for the government by a similar model, or is it unbounded?
It's like the downside. It's a dialectic. So as the downside aspects increase, also the reaction to it develops. So, and I mentioned the way in which it can develop. It's a dialectic. So the role we play in that dialectic can make the difference. But yeah, left to its own, you have these fluctuations. The point is whether the fluctuation, the amplitude of fluctuation increases or decreases. And the impression is that, at least in terms of climate, we're increasing. Also because at that global scale, there is no easy countermeasure. Other questions? Yeah.
I have to leave, so I'm asking.
Yeah.
So my question is, 40 years ago, could we have predicted where we are today? Before you answer, 20 years ago, could we have predicted? When is the moment that you think, looking back, could we have said that we will be where we are today? That's part one. And the second is, so this is what economics call path dependence. Based on where we are today, do we know where we will be, and when will we know where we will be?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So for the first part, there is a possible question, because there was this famous report of the Club of Rome in the 70s. And more or less, they predicted, not exactly this, but they predicted that we were consuming soil, that
No, I'm not talking about climate change or population. I'm talking about
technology.
technology. Only technology.
Well, one thing is,
The fact that we have this, the fact that we've got ChatGPT. So my question is only technology.
Okay.
No mind. So given the industry's insight and those who are thinking, okay, this is the next big thing. So I want to know when. So if we take stock of where we are today, when did the industry, or did the industry even know that we would be at this point? And therefore, so that gives me a sense that, okay, do you know what's going to happen in 5 years? So I'm just curious to see.
Yeah. No, well, I could cite Turing. I could cite Turing that thought of an experiment for recognizing whether an agent was intelligent, was a artificial intelligent agent or a human agent. And I'm not sure that this has been applied to ChatGPT, for example. So my impression is not very intelligent, but of course it is very good at what it does. Von Neumann, so we are talking of the 50s. Von Neumann devised a mechanism where automata could reproduce themselves. So in a sense, this was the basis for nanotechnology. And this was in the 50s. In the 70s, Conway developed a cellular automata. So, and models of self-organization. So in a sense, and this is what I was thinking of, abstract thinking already said this is possible. If once you set the border of what is computational, you can say this could be done in computational terms. Science fiction. Philip K. Dick, I'm not sure whether it's beginning of 70s, imagined the mobile phone, imagined the cellular system for communication of mobile phone. There was nothing. Still, if you take and that's why I say, is anything new? If you take some tendency, and if you know a bit of what's going on, you can predict that something will be developed. The impact of that, you need to reason in terms of a club di Roma and so. When can you understand that it will have that kind of impact? I think you have to look out of technology to understand what that kind of impact is. Technology will continue to develop. And as you get more data, as you get more computational power, there will be more things that you can happen, that you can do. The other aspects are the drives for this.
Maybe I can jump in here.
Second question.
Yeah.
So Leonardo da Vinci imagined flying machines in 15th century. Okay, so it takes 500 years for it to happen. So there are people who, I remember, I'm old enough to remember looking at what was then considered science fiction, which is real life today. Flying cars, for example. I'm sure we'll have them in your lifetime. Maybe not mine.
They're here.
They're here? Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't sat in one yet. Okay, really?
Yeah.
Flying taxis. Okay. So, in some ways, we've imagined everything. We've imagined plant-based meat, for example. Vegans, vegetarians, and eat that. So, but, and so many things we imagine which haven't happened. We only talk about, okay, it's got Newman, it's 1970, it's optical, whatever you call it. So many things. Yeah. So many things have not happened. So I'm not saying can we predict the future. That's maybe we will one day. Maybe we do. I don't know. You guys are experts. I'm a poor social scientist. I have nothing to do with technology. I find it difficult to run a phone. So I'm just sorry. Now, would you like to?
Yeah, so just to give you a little bit of background, so I've been with IBM for 21 years, and I've been with them all over the world. I started from the US with them and then traveled across. At IBM, we have something which is known as Global Technology Outlook, GTO, and it's been there for 40 years, even actually longer. Earlier, it used to be only for the SVPs, and nobody else used to get to see it. About 10 years ago, they started opening it up for their specialized clients, and then now it's available on their website, and you can actually go and see. Not the entire GTO, but some subset of it. 2015, we were in a conference. So how does the GTO come in? So Watson Labs is their anchor laboratory where you do all of the research and everything, and then they've got anchor labs all over the world. And so there's new technology that's coming up. So the labs in IBM are not just focused on information technology. You've got chemists there, you've got medicine doctors. We had about 150 doctors who were working, and we were looking at artificial intelligence and using that to predict and solve for medicine. So you had that going on. So you have the new research coming in. Then what they do is they get people who've been in the industry from the technology side and non-technologists, and they bring them in and put them in a part of the IBM headquarters, and they give them the new technology and then say, how would this technology be used in the next 10 years? So in 2015, in September, I was in the conference there, and we were looking at blockchain as, okay, this is a new technology coming out. How is this technology going to be used? So we came up with this theory. I mean, it was just, spitting in the air. And we said that if we can figure out 64 clients in 2016 come to us and say, we will do a paid POC to use blockchain as a technology in some of our processes. This is, we'll invest time and effort and people, and by February we had to put a team together because we were getting so many different requests, and by the end of 2016 we had done 650 paid POCs. But having said all of that, with Maersk, and I'm sure you know the details of this, with Maersk, IBM went in and we created a joint venture company, and we went and we started doing blockchain as the baseline for trade. November of last year, we disbanded it. So Maersk and IBM disbanded it because we could not get enough of a financial return for it, and it was a net loss. Now, coming back to what Professor Paolo just said, that it's not just the technology that matters, it's a brilliant technology, right?
Yeah, fair.
But it's how is the environment reacting to it. Now, Hong Kong has got their entire trade, which means the banks, the shipping companies, all of these different, you have to get a license for trading certain things. You have to get approvals, that this particular product is going to be traded in, and even though if it's going to be on the port, so you've got to have so all of those regulatory requirements. So they got all of that on the blockchain. Now, Singapore has been doing it since 2017, but they're even using old technology to do it. Now what they're doing is they're trying to build a bridge between Singapore and Hong Kong. It's known as GTCN. And that bridge will allow every entity in Hong Kong to trade and work with every entity in Singapore as if they're part of the same ecosystem. Now that is happening, that is the absolute extreme. But then you look at us, where we are in Pakistan, we don't even have a cloud environment in place. And cloud is like, a baby rolling, and blockchain is a young man sprinting. So we're not even here yet, and that's where the world is heading. So there, it's the ecosystem that is being developed, and how is that being developed, and what is supporting to build that ecosystem.
Sorry, this is your lecture, but
No. Very interesting. Just let me comment, because since we are running as a startup on blockchain, and we wanted to use IBM technology, but we just knew that IBM was reducing and now I got the explanation for it.
The other thing is, as a social scientist, it's also how we consider the human being. So far, our DNA structure is the old, the pre-technology DNA in many ways. And now we react differently. Like when my students come to me and I said, have you read the book? They say, yeah, here's my book. They say, I can't even see who's calling me. They say, no, here on page 73, here's this paragraph, please take a look. So the way students, at least at the IBA and elsewhere, they are responding to technology is creating a new human being. I think, I don't know whether you talk about this here or whether, Umberto Eco used to talk about it as well, and so many philosophers think about it. How does technology frame the new human being. So we, today, the way we are formed, men, women, other genders, we are responding to centuries, millennia of what we, but now I think the next millennia, the next 100 years, we get a new type of person whose brain is functioning very differently. And I'm sure at IBM and maybe at your university, where medical, biological, zoological, experts are looking at how the nerve system is being triggered by technology and how to respond to that for the next wave, for the nth wave after that.
Yeah, I have kind of a related question. It's about the nature of this technology. So as the name says, it's about information, right? But would you comment like its relation to what we would call knowledge? It seems to me that a lot of it is about communication itself. And what's the impact of it on our growth and knowledge creation is not that clear. So for example, take the aeroplane. The first flight was like 1905 or something, and by 1960s we were flying intercontinental plane, and the plane hasn't changed much since then. We solved the world food problem, lots of disease problems in very pre-technology era, or very primitive technology era. It's not, the economic growth hasn't really accelerated after the invention of information technology. We haven't really solved very big problems. And even if I think of dissemination of knowledge, like the moment some technology came, I sometimes feel very strange about it. Like even in the pre-technology era, you had local experts appearing very quickly by reading manuals and whatnot. So this nature of technology is like, it seems to me that part of it is just communicating for the sake of it without having an impact or without having an impact on more deeper knowledge.
Yeah, this is certainly true.
Make me anticipate something that will come in the last slides. But yeah, the bridge between information and knowledge, and we could also say between data and information, because information already requires some organization of it. But I think the bridge is the concept of model. So you have knowledge if you can construct a model of the information you have. And as we were discussing, once you have a model, you can think, and if it is a sufficient complex model, you can think in terms of consequences, long-range consequences, and consequences beyond the circumscript environment which is directly impacted by that technology. It is true that much of it is communication, but this very fact of communicating has already impact. And we have come to know the acronym FOMO, fear of missing out. So we are so bombarded with communication that if we miss something, we feel that we miss something important. Why? Because we do not know what is important and what is not. And if we don't have a model, then we cannot know what is important. Everything is the same, so we cannot miss anything. And this has impacts both on the economic side, because you think that you need to be abreast of everything that happens, even if it's not something that you can directly target, but also on our nervous systems, as it was mentioned. So it creates a new a new form of neurosis. It creates new conflicts within people, within families. So my son is 9, is turning 9 soon, and he spends a lot of times on my cell phone doing games. So and now what they have is that they play games with their friends at home. So instead of meeting and playing some physical game. They play some game and they chat over the game. So it's a different way of constructing relations that they are. Fortunately, they physically meet at school every day, so they're not completely separated by the actual interaction. But they are developing a forma mentis, a mind form, where being in this kind of communication is the same as being in physical communication. So that's, I think this has an impact which is starting to be measured, actually. But if we can bring knowledge in it, then they can realize what we are doing. They can understand what the difference is, what the consequences of this difference can be. Other questions? Okay, so we were talking of this. And now, downside, plus side, minus side consequences. One thing, and this again will move towards the notional model, is okay, growth, but which indicators do we take for measuring growth? Because this is, you can measure growth in terms of gross national product or in terms of Human Development Index, which I discovered was developed by a Pakistani scholar. And that brings to enormous differences. What is your indicator? What is your driver? What do you want to increase, the first one or the second one? Or are there ways to create a balanced growth where both are increased and where both are increased not at the expenses of our interesting indicators? I mentioned the increase in average income, but what about the Gini index, which measures inequalities in a national economy? So we can see that the Gini index is increasing or decreasing. I never remember which one is good, which one is bad. But it's marking the increase in differences, both in countries like Pakistan, but even more possibly in countries like America or all over the world. So I read yesterday that 264 people have the same assets as 43% of the world population. So that's something unprecedented. I mean, market expansion versus production footprint. So the ecological footprint. So what are consuming? There is a day in which they measure that the earth resources that are being consumed equal those that are being reproduced. And this day comes earlier and earlier in the year. I think it's about July now. So consumer satisfaction versus worker welfare. So where consumer satisfaction, if it is just measured in reduction of cost, can of course impact labor cost. Or consumer satisfaction versus population's welfare, where the fact of having new gadgets gave us a satisfied population, but it increases pollution, it creates the problems of electronic waste, for example, programmed obsolescence of products. So, of course, my wife has just bought the new iPhone. She's very happy because she needs it for making pictures of high quality. But what about the iPhone that she bought 2 years ago? So I'm going to a few case studies. I don't know how we are doing with time. 30 minutes. So probably I will not go through all of them, or just scheme. So supply chains on the blockchain. This is what we have worked on, and we have a few papers. And as I said, we have developed a startup which has an interest in managing supply chain. So the economic people in our collaboration tell me that this is a good thing. The idea is this: when you have a supply chain, you typically have a contractor which defines the different steps of the different levels of the supply chain and the different compensations. So if you are Walmart, you have an enormous power on your supply chain. You can dictate quality, you can dictate prices, you can dictate quantities, and so on. And so the idea is that instead, if we, and they have, the people that have come out with this model, they have elaborated a model which allows all the participants of the supply chain to form a sort of consortium, which then translates into participants in a blockchain, where they agree on quantities, on qualities, on times, and on prices. And by putting it on the blockchain as a smart contract, this agreement becomes something that everybody can control, and by putting on the blockchain the record of the transactions that have occurred, everybody can check that nobody is cheating, let's say. So the idea is this. This is the line of marginal revenues for product, which somehow decreases the quantity. So that's the euro over quantity ratio. And this is the case where you have the wholesaler contract. So the Walmart establishes the contract for all the participants. And this is where the vertical integrated chain, in the sense that they all agreed on that, moves. So you see that this line is intercepted at in different points, which means that this becomes more profitable as the quantity increases. So the idea is that the suppliers are incentivized in giving more to the supply chain, and they accept to see the revenue coming later, because the revenues are distributed once the product is sold, whereas with the wholesaler contract, they get the money as they sign the contract or as they deliver the good, and then the wholesaler can get all the remaining profit. So they trade off time versus quantity, and it can have some advantage. This is from an experiment that they did on tomato production, so in the supply chain of producing tomato sauce. And so the red line are the profits of the retailer, the producer, the two tomato suppliers, the gas supplier, and the pack supplier. And so you see that with this kind of revenue sharing scheme, plus the optimization brought by the algorithms that the people we collaborated with developed, consistently you get higher revenue for this case. So that means that this kind of cooperation can be beneficial to all participants. And this is the portion of profit. So the first the retailer still has the biggest portion, but the tomato suppliers have a greater portion than they would have. So what we have done is to put this model on the blockchain, and we have developed a model where the originator initiates smart contracts, define some general condition for supply chain, so for example in terms of quality, and a set final offer. So there is a sort of bidding for being part of this one. Whereas suppliers bid to the supply chain, agree to sharing, so the scheme of the revenue sharing, and then they can confirm that they have delivered their products, or they can transfer obligation to some sub-provider. Yep.
The value of the wholesaler in the entire system.
In this case, we do not think whether it is the producer or the wholesaler. It's the originator. It's the one who says, I will sell in the end this product. So it might be that it's the direct producer which sells to somebody else, or the wholesaler which, from the point of view of the roles in this, it's the originator.
That if you remove the wholesaler, that's at infinity all
It is not totally necessary, because the wholesaler
Can provide different advantages. For example, the network of sale points, or the network of intermediate. There are also other roles, because this supplier can be supplier in terms of final product, or raw material or semi-product, or can be supplier of financing, for example, or can be the supplier of digital infrastructure to support this. So this is a generic terms for the roles. Here. So this is the idea of the process. So we initialize the process by publishing the tender for this. Of course, this might not necessary if some agreement has been made, if supply chain has been established before, but in principle, these are the conditions that we want to have for the supply chain. And you create the supply chain, and you put it on the blockchain. So this BLC is the blockchain seen as a distributed ledger. Then there is a process when the supply chain is built. So all suppliers write the offer, get the criteria, and get the tender so they get the tender to know what is there, they write the offer, and they get the criteria. So I offer to produce 1 ton, but all in all, the consortium will give you 800 kilos to produce, because another 200 kilos are for a different producer.
take advantage.
I get the piece where we can use smart contracts to get the agreements going.
The smart contract is basically the reification of the matrix which describes the quantities. So I didn't want to go into the details of how this matrix is constructed, but basically it's made by defining for each level what quantity of a kind of product each supplier will supply. So you can think that you can think that the supply chain can be seen as a tree where let's suppose that there are two levels. So this is produces a semi 1, and this produces semi 2, and this produces a row 1, this produces row 2, this produces row 1, and this produces row 2. So for each level, you build something which says, at each level says, there is this row 1, there is this row 2, and there is a supplier 1 for this, supplier 2 for this. So you have this. And you say how many you will have, and then you will get your quota of revenue sharing. So you first collect all this information, then there is an algorithm which calculates an optimization. That's why I say they can say I can provide 1 ton, but out of the optimization is 800 kilo for you and 200 kilo for the other one. And then this matrix of percentage, let's say, of the total revenue is put on the blockchain as a smart contract. So you build the smart contracts here. So this matrix construction is the key. So you read the offers for the participants and you publish the quotas here, and they are put on the blockchain. Then in the end, you produce the thing and you write on the blockchain how much you have produced, how much you have conferred, and you read the quotas, so you can say, okay, the revenue was this, and now I have to share these quotas, and so I write the revenue here, and I write the transfer of the actual currency here, and everything is recorded on the blockchain. That's the idea. So we developed this model. We created some interfaces for the originator to put the data and the criteria, for the supplier to write their commitment in terms of quantities, in terms of prices, and so on. And this is, at the end, the outcome is made known to all participants. So one further advantage was that there is a complicated criterion, because the fact is that some supplier can have incurred additional costs for making its production adequate to the global criteria. So you have to recognize this. But the point is that whereas with a wholesaler contract, the supplier can try to maximize its own profit by publishing additional costs which are not really there. So it's not incentivized to improve its processes. In this way, it's incentivized, because the fact that some incurred costs are higher might mean that you will be asked to produce less, to contribute less. So there are some balances, but as the previous diagram showed, there are advantages for all of them. So this is another project which is somehow related. This is from Professor Peresky, who is a co-founder of our startup. I think I will skip it. It's still based on a blockchain. It's still based on creating digital twins between products and representations. I will just skip this, and I will talk about this instead, which is a project. It's under a European project. This is not something I'm directly involved with, but a professor, which was first formerly in my department, now she's in the Department of Engineering. She developed a smart startup, which is called WSense, which is specialized in underwater sensors. So this is an interesting application because you have these big fish farms. This is about aquaculture. I think this is actually Norway. So you have these cages where thousands of fish are bred, and you need to monitor the state of the fish, the health of the fish, but you also have to monitor the possible damages to the cage, because one of the worst things that can happen is that the cage breaks and thousands or millions of fish come out, and they're not necessarily compatible with the outside environment. They might predate of local fish. So, for example, in Istanbul, there is this problem that you have the Bosphorus, which separates the Black Sea from the Marmara Sea. And if you have aquaculture there and the cage breaks, that means that populations are mixed, and that is a terrible thing, of course. So this is the way in which they do. So they have underwater sensor nodes. They send their signals, and this gateway translates the underwater signals into information, sends them to a remote control center or to the W Cloud software platform. And in the W Cloud software platform, you have real-time storage, analysis, and visualization of the data. So you can have this kind of control center. And this is the WPCAM, which is the smallest existing model, 1 centimeter by 5 centimeter, with an integrated sensing board for real-time fish welfare and fish activity monitoring. So we have started to put also sensors about cage stability on that. So this is some way in which technology on the one hand allows to control the situation, but on the other hand, it might mean that more aquaculture farms can be developed, because if they rely on the technology to control the system, they can be more confident. So is this necessarily a good thing? This is another this is a European project, Gen for Olive. It has to do with oliviculture. And what the idea is that only 5% of olive varieties present in the worldwide harvested area are commercially exploited. Yep.
Previous use case, what was the reason that you chose blockchain, the technology behind aquaculture? Like in first case,
Because aquaculture?
Yeah.
No, aquaculture is not
It's not a
related
blockchain.
to blockchain. No.
Oh, it's not.
It's
Related to the transmission of signals. So then they are stored in the cloud.
Wireless sensor networks.
But underwater. So that makes things, it requires a special technology. So that's why they develop this WPCO. And again, there's no blockchain in this example. But the point is, there is, and in Italy in particular, there is a big biodiversity. We have 500 types of different varieties of olives. And there is a big difference between Spain and Italy, for example. They're the biggest producers of olive oil, but Spain relies on olive with high yield and which are prone to mechanization. Whereas Italy, we have big producers, but we have a niche of small producers with incredibly high quality oil. And the point is that we want to preserve that kind of variety, but we also want that there is some profitability for these producers. So the idea here is to characterize around 700 varieties and 1,000 wild and ancient genotypes from the whole Mediterranean basin. So it's, there is a number of germ banks that are involved, that they preserve seeds from the different varieties. They are in Turkey, Morocco, Greece, Italy, Spain, and France. And we are making it so that all the information which is distributed in these germ banks is concentrated in the platform of the project and made available for querying by farmers, by breeders, by producers to understand what is the best variety that they can plant on their soil, given the quality, the characteristics of the soil, given the climate characteristics, temperature, wind, the difference of temperature between day and night. And so what, this is what we want to achieve: climate change resilience, pests and diseases resilience varieties, high production and high quality varieties, and adaptation to modern planting systems. So again, there is a dialectic, there is a tension between these two objectives and these two objectives, because potentially they could mean less biodiversity, whereas this could be preserving the current diversity. So, but still, what we are working with is with a collection of stakeholders which come from different backgrounds. And so the idea is to build a community of active players to make breeding programs a tool in end users' business strategy, co-creation and capacity building activities. So in this project, we launched 2 calls to farmers, breeders, producers to use the results of the project. Deploy in?
You deploy the network in the wild habitat?
No. In this case, we are not deploying sensors. In this case, we are collecting data which are currently in the germ banks and make them available in specialized form. Then, of course, what can happen in the field is that the pharmacy or the breeder sees a tree, sees leaves, sees olives, and either they are not sure what variety is because maybe there was already there, or is not sure whether it has been attacked by some parasite. So what they can do is to make a picture, connect to the portal, send the picture, and the portal will come out with some information on what's happening there. But there is no sensor put in the field at the moment. So this is also interesting because a survey was conducted in these countries, so they're part of a consortium, but also in Iran. So with these respondents about what they are interested in. So, for example, if you had tried tolerant varieties, if you have a need to acquire a new variety, these are the percentages. So you see that the need to acquire a new variety is significant here. What is your future orientation towards higher quality oil or more productive varieties? And interestingly enough, there is more interest in producing high quality oil. And our conclusions, new resistant variety to face a specific problem. Yeah, they're very interested in developing new resistant variety. How do they develop? You look at varieties which have some principle which can be resistant, and try to see if you can transfer these features to other varieties. And so what we did as computer science department was working on finding requirements. So we sent questionnaires about what kind of descriptors do they have for these categories. And this is, we organized them. These are the descriptors, how they will be ranked, for example, in an ordered way or using intervals. And from this, we have constructed the schema of a database and where data will be put. So for the moment, we have a schema. We have an interface for inputting data to populate the database. So for each of those criteria, we prepared the input field for that form. So if it is an interval, we say which is the range of the interval, and so on. So in conclusion, what role for IT? So there is a potential for democratization. There is a potential for cooperation. There is a potential for reducing ecological impact. There is a potential for improving welfare. But there is a tension because of what we mentioned before. The key is diffusion of information and co-design. So we cannot see the technology separated by the stakeholders, by the actual agents which will be impacted or which will orient it. And so co-design of what we want to do. Control of processes, risk assessment and management. But as I said, this requires models. And I say this requires open models so that they can be queried, they can be agreed upon, they can be put in question, and they can be modified. Or using a different slogan, challenging the algorithm. So as I said, the result of the algorithm depends much on the data with which you feed it. And so quality of data, control on quality of data, control of algorithms. I mentioned explainable AI. But as we were discussing, it cannot be left only to the technologist. It must involve communities, it must involve social experts, and so on. I mentioned models of what? Processes, consumption and generation of resources, so models of impact, systemic feedbacks. My original formation was in systems theory. But I see now, and we mentioned the predator-prey model, for example, I see now that those concepts from systems theory are very actual in this sense. So we cannot look at things in isolation. We need to have models of how their impact extends beyond the local situation. And as I said, models need indicators, and indicators depend on goals. What do you want to optimize as your indicator? The gross national product or the human development index? But on the other hand, indicators depend on the possibility to extract data. And it's, once again, you require open data for that. So openness, co-design, and evaluation of systemic effects. So innovation is not neutral with respect to goals. If you have certain goals, you will direct your innovation in a direction. The models need to take into account the nature and the finiteness of resources. Models need to be discussed and agreed upon, and this means that you have to give a voice to the stakeholders, and many of the stakeholders are not usually reached when innovating. And a way of controlling the algorithms is that they derive from the models. They're not just conjured from some form of deep learning, but they have to be directed so as to be conformant with the model. That's it. Thank you very much.
IBA introduce themselves after we're done so that we can get to know each other and connect with them?
Sure. You can start from yourself.
I'm a student here. It's my 6th semester. My name is Hamza.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just want to know what people are up to. For example, they said that he's worked at IBM for 25 years, I think. So I think. Yeah. So, if people can give a brief introduction, what technologies they're working on and what companies they're working on.
Okay. Over to you, sir.
Rahil Siddiqui from Systems Limited. I'm working as a head of delivery for the MEA region. So Systems basically works for in all sorts of services and delivering IT solutions to almost all the part of the world. Presentation was great, especially yesterday's one where you were addressing on the blockchain. Some of my team members addressed that presentation. So it was really great. So thank you.
Thank you. You, sir?
Similar is I am also a student here.
Okay. I'm Shakil. I'm the Dean of School of Mathematics and Computer Science. So, okay, we have Sham here. Sham's a faculty member. So I'll start from you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Me? Yeah. I'm Aram Zafar. Nice to meet you, sir. I'm a CEO for an IT software startup called Junction Advisors. We work with Salesforce, essentially a gold partner of Salesforce, based out of Canada, with a large team here in Toronto. So good to be here. Thank you.
Same company, I guess we're all a team here.
Yeah.
So manager and we have 2 consultants here. We're working in Salesforce currently, part of Cloud Junction. So we're here as a team. Nice to meet you.
I've been an alumni over here, so I studied from 3-4 people already over here. I graduated 2 years ago. My name is Fatma Khan. Nice to meet you.
Muzammil, the same as her. I'm an alumni of IBA. Studied from some of the teachers over here, and good to be back. Amazing presentation, sir.
I'm from HBL. I head a design team. I'm also an alumni of IBA. And I'm more, since the last 2 years, we are focused on robotic process automation. That's our main target for the next 2 years as well. We are trying to eliminate as much as manual work in the banks that is currently going on. Since you all know, the banks are the most backwards department of backward department in the entire industry. So बहुत सारी चीज़ें बहुत आगे चली हैं. Banks are still on the backward side. So we are working on robotic process automations, AI. There's a lot going on in banks as well.
Iqbal Ali Khan. I used to be the CDO for Meezan Bank, and prior to that, I was with IBM for 21 years.
Manan, I'm one of the co-founders of Tintash. We're a technology consulting company. Essentially build products for startups, mostly in the US.
Hi, I'm Samir Ahmed Khan. I'm running Social Champ. It's a social media management platform. I'm an alumni of Karachi University. I've been mentored by Jawad Fari, my mentor. So Social Champ is a social media management platform that we are right now working on semantic analysis, working on ChatGPT, integrating that into a product. Basically, it's a one platform. You integrate all your social networks, post to all platforms, schedule content, allow people to comment replies and see those replies and see analytics, generate reports. And recently we also launched Your Champ. Your Champ is a social identity for social media where you connect your all social accounts and get your total social reach. So it's a SaaS product, Delaware US company. It's been 4 or 5 years since the company's been running.
Oh, my name is Mohib. I'm Chief Operating Officer at Sasta. I used to be a mathematician and actually done a few startups around the world.
My name is Mahin Adanji. I graduated from the LSC, so I'm an economist by training. I'm running an education technology company by the name of Dot and Line.
Sir?
Ashia Salim, I'm a faculty here. I teach courses in strategy.
Irfan, I'm a faculty member.
Right, I work at the CS department, computer science.
Mehraj Khan, I am faculty here.
Shahid Hussain, I'm computer science faculty.
Right, I'm Isha. I do mathematics. I am in the faculty, but math is all that ever drives me anywhere.
Wasim, faculty with CS.
Hi, my name is Osama and I'm Senior Executive Industrial Linkages at the Sales Office at SMCS.
This is Fana. I'm looking after a school and assistant manager of SMCS.
We missed someone at the back.
Part of the CS faculty. I spent, I think, about 30 years working with finance and banking. But I'm here to talk about this. And I really loved how you connected the themes. I didn't expect this. I thought it would be very different, but you've given me a lot of thought. I actually made 4 pages of notes that I'm sure to use in my classes because of the themes that you've written. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
I also thought it was
very different. But
So any questions or we just break for lunch? Okay. So
thank you very much.
I had just few mementos from IBA.
Oh.
So this is the one, a small sheet, which will remind you that you were here at IBA. Very small token from our school.
Oh, thank you very much. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you very much.
Where is it?